My name is Karen Whedbee, and I am an associate professor in the Department of Communication. In the United States, it's usually associated with the First Amendment, and that says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. And what that means, in effect, is that speakers have a right to express themselves without fear of government regulation, retribution, or punishment. It's important to emphasize that it's a legal concept. So it is a matter of a constraint on the government. Freedom of speech is a civil right, but it's also a human right. We need the freedom of speech to be able to express ourselves, our beliefs, our values, our fears, and our hopes. To deny a person their freedom of speech would be to harm their autonomy and their dignity. And so it's recognized under the Bill of Rights as well as under the Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations. It benefits society in a lot of different ways. Freedom of speech is important as an end in itself, but it's also a means to other important ends. So, for instance, it's important for politics. In order to have a democratic government, you need freedom of speech, included in debate and deliberation of Congress, for example, or it's the right of the press, an independent free press to do investigative journalism or editorial writing. And it's also important for citizens to be able to hold their government accountable for the decisions that the government makes. Beyond that, though, freedom of speech is important for culture. Think about musicians or artists. They need freedom of speech. Any public performer, for instance, I think of stand-up comics. They are very much dependent on freedom of speech, and any public performer or social influencer. And then also I want to mention that freedom of speech is really important for scholars, scientists, and philosophers who are pursuing truth in an independent way without focus on political bias or something like that. And so it's very important that they have freedom of speech. Freedom of speech can be used for good or for bad purposes. It's important to remember. The government is not supposed to dictate to us standards of right and wrong in our speech. And that's the whole point of the First Amendment. So that means that there's going to be a very high burden of proof on the government when they step in and try to punish somebody for deceptive speech or threatening speech or otherwise dangerous speech. There's got to be a very high burden of proof on the government. Just because something is legal, though, that doesn't mean that it's ethical. So we can say things that are technically going to be legal and the government can't punish us, but we're still ethically responsible for our speech. And so you need to think about professional codes of conduct. We need to consider about religious duties that we might have, other spiritual duties, or just personal sense of conscience is extremely important. The government cannot dictate to us what is right and wrong. We have the responsibility of choosing for ourselves, and one hopes that we'll make a good decision in that.